Right now, the biggest technology companies on the planet are spending billions trying to figure out how to make smartphones less addictive. Teams of researchers, congressional hearings, Surgeon General warnings, all racing to solve a problem that certain Hasidic communities in Brooklyn began addressing through voluntary restriction decades ago. No billion-dollar research budgets, no federal task forces, just communal rules rooted in principles far older than the internet itself. While the rest of the world handed teenagers unlimited access and hoped for the best, these communities looked at the same technology and said no. They anticipated a crisis mainstream society is only now taking seriously. The question is whether their answer, built on faith, family, and collective discipline, actually worked, and what it cost the people who lived inside it. Long before the internet became a household word, Brooklyn's Hasidic neighborhoods were already experts in the art of setting boundaries. While the rest of the world debated screen time and digital distractions, these communities had been wrestling with a much older question: how much outside influence is too much? Hasidic is often used as a catch-all, but it actually refers to a patchwork of dynasties, congregations, and families, each with its own rabbinic leadership, customs, and rules. These groups form part of the broader Haredi, or ultra-Orthodox world, where the drive to limit outside cultural influence has deep roots. No single policy fits all. What's true in a Satmar enclave might not hold for Bobov, Belz, or Chabad. Even within a single block in Williamsburg or Borough Park, families may follow different guidelines, shaped by the teachings of their particular rebbe or the traditions handed down through generations. The reasoning behind these boundaries isn't just about technology. It's about preserving modesty, protecting spiritual life, and ensuring the continuity of a community that has survived centuries of upheaval. For many, the greatest concern is the next generation. Children are seen not only as individuals, but as the future of the group. What they see, hear, and absorb from the outside world is treated as a matter of communal survival. Outside media, whether television, movies, newspapers, or eventually the internet, are viewed as carriers of more than just information. They bring language, fashion, values, and political ideas that may clash with the community's ideals. There's anxiety about sexual imagery, about models of adulthood that diverge from traditional roles, about humor or entertainment that might undermine respect for elders or religious authority. Even something as simple as a commercial jingle can be a source of debate. These concerns are not unique to Hasidic Jews. Many religious and cultural groups have worried about the effects of outside influence, especially on children. What sets these communities apart is the degree of collective action. Instead of leaving decisions to individual parents, rabbinic leaders have often issued formal decrees, sometimes called takanot, banning or restricting certain technologies. In some cases, families sign pledges or agree to communal standards. Social pressure and the desire to belong do much of the enforcement work. It's important to note that these restrictions are not based on clinical studies or public health data. They arise from religious law, cultural memory, and a desire to shield what's seen as sacred from what's seen as profane. The benefits: less exposure to certain images, more time for study and family life, are weighed against real costs. For those who leave the community, the learning curve can be steep. Navigating job applications, online banking, or even setting up an email account may require skills never taught at home or in school. For teenagers growing up inside, the rules can spark quiet rebellion, with some hiding smartphones or seeking out forbidden content in secret. Still, the core idea remains. In a world where information moves faster than ever, these communities chose to draw a line decades before most people imagined the need. Whether that line is practical, sustainable, or desirable is a question each viewer must answer. But the story doesn't end with bans. Somehow, in the heart of Brooklyn, these same communities run businesses, communicate globally, and adapt to a digital economy, often without personally owning the very technology that drives it. How do they pull that off? The answer is as layered as the communities themselves. In Brooklyn's Hasidic neighborhoods during the 1970s and 1980s, Television became a point of sharp division. Satmar, known for its strict approach, issued documented bans on television sets, citing the risk of secular influence undermining religious life. Rabbinic rulings warned that television brought language and images at odds with the community's standards of modesty and tradition. Reports from the era describe public statements, school policies, and the threat of exclusion from communal events for those who ignored the ban. While precise dates and the extent of enforcement require archival verification, the intention was clear. Television was seen as a gateway to values that threatened the fabric of Hasidic identity. In Bobov and Belz, rulings against television also appeared by the 1980s, but with more conditional language. Both dynasties allowed limited radio use, reasoning that radio, without images, posed less risk. Families could access news or weather, provided content stayed within communal boundaries. Yiddish newspapers remained a primary source of information, offering an alternative to secular media. These approaches reflected a careful balance between the need for information and the desire to shield the community from outside culture. Chabad, or Lubavitch, stood apart. Rather than a universal ban, Chabad leaders permitted selective media use, especially for religious outreach. Television could be used to broadcast the Rebbe's talks, but secular programming was discouraged. This approach signaled a willingness to adapt technology for religious purposes, rather than rejecting it outright. Earlier concerns about secular broadcasting, movies, and newspapers had already shaped attitudes toward media. The bans and limits on television predated any widespread scientific debate about screens or child development. Instead, these policies grew from religious law and collective memory. Children in these communities grew up with little exposure to mainstream television, shaping daily routines and generational expectations. Even within the same neighborhood, enforcement varied, with some families quietly keeping a set hidden, while others relied on approved radio or newsletters. The result was a patchwork of practices, each community, and often each family, drawing its own line. By the mid-1980s, the boundary between community and outside world faced a new kind of test. Personal computers were making their way into homes and businesses across Brooklyn. At first, these machines were seen as tools, accounting, word processing, maybe a little educational software. But the arrival of networked access in the 1990s changed everything. Suddenly, a desktop in the corner of a living room or a back office could connect to an endless stream of information, ideas, and images far beyond what a TV antenna or a radio dial could deliver. Unlike television, which broadcast one way and could be turned off by a parent or monitored by a teacher, the internet was private, interactive, and almost invisible. A child could explore far beyond the boundaries of the neighborhood, unsupervised and often undetected. For parents and community leaders who had spent decades drawing lines in the sand, this new technology was a moving tide. The difference was not just in content, but in control. Where television was a window, the internet was a door, one that could be opened quietly at any hour. Not every Hasidic group responded the same way. Some, like Satmar, issued outright bans on home computers unless special permission was granted. Others allowed computers for work or school, but insisted on filters or public placement. Bobov leadership, for example, permitted computers in yeshiva offices but required that students use only filtered access. The internet, more than any previous technology, exposed the limits of communal enforcement. Supervising a television set in a living room was one thing. Monitoring a modem in a teenager's bedroom or a backroom office was something else entirely. The risk was not only what might be seen, but that it might be seen alone. The private nature of internet use made it harder for families and schools to uphold communal standards. Rumors spread of teenagers hiding dial-up connections, or adults quietly checking secular news after hours. The old tools, pledges, public statements, even social pressure began to feel less certain. By the late 1990s, the pressure was clear. The community needed a new answer, one that could address both the reach and the secrecy of the internet age. An asifa is a large communal gathering called to address a major issue facing the community. In Hasidic Brooklyn, asifas became the stage for public debate on the internet long before mainstream America began to worry about screen time. The first significant asifa on this topic took place around 1999 and 2000. Organized by the Vad Laman Tohar Hamachaneh. Reports describe thousands of men attending. As rabbinic councils and organizers set out a policy, personal internet use was prohibited, but business use could be tolerated if absolutely necessary. The message was clear, and what happened in private homes would shape the future of the community. This was not a universal rule for all Hasidic groups, but it established a pattern that influenced many. Over a decade later, the issue moved from principle to policy on a much larger scale. On May 21, 2012, tens of thousands of ultra-Orthodox men filled Citi Field and the adjacent Arthur Ashe Stadium in Queens. The Ichud HaKahilos Council convened the event, aiming to address the risks of unfiltered internet access. Attendance estimates ranged from 40,000 to over 60,000. The gathering was gender segregated, men filled the stadiums, while women watched from remote locations. Press access was tightly controlled, with journalists largely kept outside and coverage limited to official statements and speeches broadcast on giant screens inside. Rabbinic leaders addressed the crowd in Yiddish, English, and Hebrew, reinforcing the policy that had taken shape since the late 1990s. Internet use at home was discouraged, and if required for work or essential needs, it must be filtered and monitored. The event did not claim to speak for every Hasidic family or rabbinic authority. Some groups, such as Chabad, continued to allow limited digital outreach, while others enforced stricter bans. Even within a single community, enforcement varied. One family might keep a filtered computer in a locked office for business, while another avoided the internet entirely, relying on handwritten ledgers and face-to-face transactions. The 2012 asifa became a public symbol of organized opposition to unrestricted internet access. It highlighted the collective decision-making process that shaped communal boundaries set deliberately, debated openly, and enforced through a mix of policy, social expectation, and personal conviction. For those who later left the community, these restrictions posed real challenges. Learning to fill out job applications, use online banking, or set up an email account often meant starting from scratch. For teenagers, the rules sometimes led to quiet acts of rebellion, with smartphones hidden in coat linings or behind loose bricks in the schoolyard. These gatherings made one thing unmistakable. The boundaries around technology were not accidental. They were the result of careful public choices by rabbinic councils and organizers, reflecting a community's attempt to manage change on its own terms. In 2002, Hasidic schools and synagogues in Brooklyn distributed a printed pamphlet that set a clear boundary. Internet access was to be reserved for work-related needs. This guidance, crafted by rabbinic councils, carried authority not through law but through the weight of communal expectation. At a time when the wider world was just beginning to explore the internet's possibilities, these communities drew a sharp line between the digital tools needed for business and the temptations of personal use. The work exception emerged as a practical response to economic reality. Many families relied on small businesses, clinics, or retail shops that required online orders, billing, or communication. The rules permitted filtered computers in offices or work laptops, often with software that allowed only a handful of approved sites. Employers within the community sometimes made these filters a condition of employment. At home, the standard was stricter. Open internet was discouraged, and personal browsing for leisure was off limits. These standards traveled through a network of social channels. Schools sent home letters for parents to sign, pledging to keep devices away from children. Synagogue bulletins posted reminders before holidays and at the start of the school year. Family elders repeated the rules at gatherings, and sometimes a neighbor might quietly alert a parent if a child was seen with a device. The expectation was woven into daily life, reinforced by conversation and custom. Yet, application varied widely. Some congregations enforced the policy rigidly, while others allowed more flexibility for professionals or older children. Women's access to technology was often more restricted, but mothers frequently managed school emails and online banking. Age, gender, occupation, and the stance of the local rabbinic authority all shaped how the rules played out at home. Unlike government bans, these restrictions depended on shared values and social trust. No courts or fines, just the understanding that belonging meant following the standard. For some, the adjustment was difficult, but the community managed to balance economic participation with a guarded approach to the digital world. In Brooklyn's Hasidic neighborhoods, technology takes on a shape that feels both familiar and distinct. The kosher phone, a staple of daily life, is designed for one main purpose: making calls. Some models allow limited texting, but only if the device meets strict certification standards set by rabbinic authorities. There's no internet browser, no social media, no hidden apps. The software is locked down at the factory or by trusted technicians, and a visible seal often marks the device as approved. Attempts to install new features or connect to the web are quietly blocked. Families choose from a range of kosher phones, each reflecting their community's standards. The most conservative groups, like Satmar, insist on the simplest models: calls only, no texting, no camera. Others, such as Bobov and Bells, may permit texting or a basic calendar, provided the device passes community filters. Chabad, known for its outreach work, sometimes allows a bit more flexibility for those involved in education or organizational roles. Yet the guiding rule remains: the phone is for communication, not for exploring the wider world. At work, the approach shifts to meet practical needs. Hasidic-owned businesses and offices often rely on computers, but these are tightly controlled. Filtering software, managed by community IT specialists, limits access to only the websites required for business, ordering supplies, checking invoices, or contacting vendors. In some workplaces, the computer is locked away, or the internet is switched on only during business hours. Employees may be required to use filtered devices, and some employers make this a condition of employment. At home, even filtered computers are rare. Personal browsing, especially for entertainment or curiosity, is discouraged. This clear line between personal and occupational technology is intentional. A kosher phone for daily life, a filtered computer for work, each tool serves its own role. The system aims to reduce temptation and keep boundaries intact. For children and teenagers, the message is direct. Technology is for adults, for work, for necessity, not for play. Parents often check devices, and schools may require families to sign pledges keeping the internet out of reach. These boundaries come with challenges. Those who leave the community often describe the difficulty of adapting to a world where digital skills are assumed. Filling out online forms, setting up email, or navigating government websites can be overwhelming after years of limited access. Even within the community, quiet resistance surfaces. Stories circulate of teenagers borrowing smartphones, hiding devices, or finding ways around restrictions. The community responds with renewed pledges and reminders, but the push and pull continues. Communication is allowed, connection is managed. In a time when many are questioning the effects of constant connectivity, these neighborhoods offer a model that is both strict and, in some ways, ahead of its time. The balance between access and restraint remains a defining feature of daily life. It's a familiar punchline in the age of digital anxiety. While most of the world was still celebrating the wonders of the smartphone, some communities were already asking if maybe, just maybe, there was such a thing as too much connection. But what does the research actually say about teenagers, screens, and mental health? Here, the story shifts from tradition and policy to the measured language of peer-reviewed science, a field that has exploded in the past decade as social media and smartphones became woven into daily adolescent life. Across dozens of studies, a pattern emerges. Heavy use of social media and smartphones among teenagers is linked to higher rates of anxiety and depression. These findings don't claim that every minute spent online leads to distress, or that every adolescent is equally at risk. Instead, the numbers describe a statistical association, a tendency for symptoms to increase as daily hours climb, especially past 3 or 4 hours per day. One meta-analysis, pooling data from over 2 million adolescents, found that those in the top quarter of social media use had about a 34% higher risk of reporting significant anxiety or depression compared to those in the lowest quarter. Another review, spanning 25 meta-analyses, reported small but consistent associations. The more time teens spent on screens, the more likely they were to report feeling sad, anxious, or withdrawn. Still, the effect sizes were modest, and researchers caution that many studies rely on self-reported screen time and symptoms, which can muddy the waters. Longitudinal studies, those that follow the same group of teens over time, add a layer of detail. In one project tracking over 4,000 preteens, those who reported 3 or more hours of social media use per day had nearly double the odds of developing depressive symptoms 2 years later, even after accounting for factors like sleep and family background. Another study in the UK used smartphone apps to log actual usage, finding that more than 3 hours daily predicted a noticeable increase in depressive symptoms over 12 months, though the relationship weakened when sleep quality was factored in. Researchers have also looked at the specific ways that heavy smartphone use might influence mental health. Some studies point to disrupted sleep, especially when devices are used late at night. Others focus on the role of social comparison. Seeing curated images of peers can heighten feelings of inadequacy, particularly for girls. Cyberbullying and online harassment add another layer of risk. For a subset of teens, problematic smartphone use shows a stronger link to worsening mood and anxiety, as well as increased loneliness. Yet, there are important caveats. Most of the evidence is correlational, not causal. That is, while high usage and poor mental health often appear together, it's difficult to say which comes first, or whether other factors, like pre-existing vulnerability or offline stress, are driving both. Some policy experiments, such as school phone bans, have reduced in-school usage, but haven't always produced clear improvements in student well-being. The broader environment, family, school, and community matters just as much as the device itself. Taken together, the scientific picture is nuanced. Heavy social media and smartphone use is associated with increased anxiety and depression among adolescents. But the relationship is complex and shaped by many factors. There's no single threshold or universal outcome, and the research stops short of prescribing one-size-fits-all solutions. Still, the concerns that drive contemporary debates about screens and youth echo, in their own way, the worries that led some communities to draw boundaries decades earlier. If the world's sleep doctors had been paying attention to Brooklyn, they might have noticed something. The Hasidic approach to technology often sidestepped one of the thorniest problems in the digital age, adolescent sleep. While most parents now worry about midnight scrolling and buzzing notifications, many Hasidic families were already in the habit of shutting things down early, long before the first studies linked screens to lost sleep. But the science here is tangled, and the story isn't as tidy as it sounds. Sleep stands apart from anxiety and depression. It's not just a symptom, but a basic need, one that's easily displaced by a glowing device on the nightstand. Studies repeatedly connect nighttime notifications and late-night use to shorter sleep and later bedtimes among teenagers. The effect is most pronounced when screens are used right before bed, especially for social media or games. But the numbers tell a mixed story. Some research finds only a small reduction in total sleep time, sometimes as little as 15 or 20 minutes per extra hour of screen use. Other studies report negligible or even no effect, especially when kids use screens earlier in the evening or for less interactive content. Much of the evidence relies on self-reported habits and cross-sectional snapshots, which means researchers ask teens how much they use their phones and how tired they feel, then look for patterns. This approach can't untangle which comes first. Does scrolling cause poor sleep, or do tired, stressed teens reach for their phones? Correlation is not causation, and the best designed studies still struggle to control for everything that shapes a young person's sleep, family routines, mental health, personality, even the noise in the hallway. Other factors matter too. Supportive family rules, stable home life, and pre-existing distress all play a role in who loses sleep to technology and who doesn't. In Hasidic neighborhoods, the rules against personal devices and the cultural emphasis on early bedtime may offer some protection, but not every family or community enforces them in the same way. Some teens find ways around the restrictions, and others may face different pressures entirely. What's clear is that the link between screens and sleep is real, but modest and easily overstated. The strongest evidence points to late-night interactive use as the main culprit, not technology itself. For communities that drew the line early, the benefits may include a little more rest, but the story remains complicated, shaped as much by tradition and household rhythms as by any single device. Warnings about social media's risks have become part of mainstream health advice. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General issued an advisory on mental health, urging parents and schools to monitor young people's online habits. The American Psychological Association cautioned that teenagers who spend more than 3 or 4 hours a day on social media face higher rates of anxiety and depression. Yet these statements stop short of claiming every user is harmed. They call for vigilance, not blanket bans, and acknowledge that vulnerability varies from one child to another. As these concerns gained traction, the response shifted from private guidance to public rules. France, in 1918, barred students under 15 from using mobile phones during the school day. China soon followed, restricting most primary and secondary students from bringing phones to school at all. In the United States, Florida enacted a statewide ban on smartphone use during instructional time in 2024, while California required districts to limit phone use in classrooms as early as 1919. By 2026, dozens of countries and U.S. states had adopted similar measures, reaching nearly 1 billion students worldwide. Most of these policies are temporary and bound to specific locations. Phones are silenced at the school gate but return in backpacks after dismissal. Enforcement falls to teachers, not parents or religious leaders, and the rules often last only as long as a school year or a political cycle. In contrast, some communities set broader expectations. Hasidic leaders in Brooklyn, for example, have debated the dangers of outside influence for decades, drawing on tradition and religious law rather than clinical research. Their boundaries extend beyond classrooms, shaping home life, work, and social circles. Neither approach offers certainty. School bans can't reach into homes, and community rules can create tension for those who resist. Each reflects a wider debate. How far should institutions go in shaping the digital lives of the next generation? For those who grew up where the internet was more rumor than reality, the first steps into the digital world can feel almost cinematic. Shulem Dean, who left the Satmar community as an adult, once wrote that sending his first email felt like witnessing a miracle. The moment was both simple and profound, a message blinking out into a world he'd only heard about, never touched. But the AWE fades quickly when the basics of modern life come rushing in. Former members often describe the digital learning curve as a series of small, bewildering mountains. The first challenge is usually practical: filling out an online job application, creating a resume, or uploading a document to a portal. For many, even the idea of a resume is new. The process of choosing a template, attaching a file, and clicking submit can take hours. Some recount sitting in public libraries or coffee shops, watching teenagers glide through screens while they puzzle over each step. Banking, too, is transformed. A checking account that once meant a paper ledger now requires passwords, two-factor authentication, and a smartphone app. One former member described the anxiety of entering a branch and being told, "You can just do this online." Video calls, so ordinary elsewhere, become a hurdle. How to angle the camera, when to mute, what to say when the screen freezes. Workplace software, from email clients to scheduling platforms, presents a new language to decipher. Many describe the feeling as arriving late to a conversation that everyone else started years ago. The organization Footsteps, founded in 2003, has become a bridge for those making this leap. Staff and volunteers offer workshops on everything from computer basics to digital job searches. Members learn how to set up an email address, navigate online forms, and prepare for video interviews. For some, the process is empowering, a way to claim a place in a world that once felt closed off. For others, the adjustment is bittersweet, marked by moments of embarrassment or frustration. It's important to remember that no single story stands for all. One former member might breeze through a coding boot camp, while another struggles to open a browser tab. Gender, age, and family background shape every journey. Some women, restricted from technology in their homes, become the digital point person for their families after leaving, learning to manage school emails and online banking almost overnight. Others rely on friends or mentors, sometimes from within the community, sometimes from outside, for help with the basics. Researchers studying these transitions caution against drawing sweeping conclusions. Anecdotes reveal the challenges, but broader studies are rare. What's clear is that the costs of restriction are real, especially for those who leave. Yet many who stay describe a different kind of benefit. More time for family, less digital noise, a sense of continuity with the past. The reasoning is rooted in religious law and communal tradition, not in the language of clinical research or public health. The standards vary, not just between Satmar, Bobov, Belz, and Chabad, but from one household to the next. The question lingers: would most people choose this path, with its steep learning curves and careful boundaries? For some, the answer is no. For others, the trade-off feels worth it. And yet, in the heart of Brooklyn, these communities manage to run businesses, communicate with clients, and participate in the economy, often without personally owning the very technology that powers it all. That paradox, and the ingenuity behind it, is where the story turns next. In these Brooklyn neighborhoods, filtered phones and communal guidelines shape daily life in ways that are both practical and personal. For some families, the absence of constant digital noise means children gather at the table to finish homework, parents enforce bedtime without bargaining, and evenings unfold around familiar routines. The rules draw boundaries, sometimes strict, sometimes flexible, making expectations clear for children and adults alike. Reduced distraction is often cited as a benefit, but the reality is more nuanced. Not every household enforces the same restrictions, and not every child accepts them quietly. Some teenagers find ways around the rules, borrowing devices or sneaking smartphones into backpacks, testing the limits of what's allowed. The experience of leaving this environment can be disorienting. One former member, after years of using only a filtered flip phone, kept the habit even after moving out. She explained that a basic phone helped her focus and avoid the pull of endless notifications, especially while building a new life. Yet, she also described the challenges of adapting to a world where job applications and essential paperwork required digital fluency, often turning to friends or support groups for help. Her story reflects a practical choice rather than a religious one, showing how some practices persist beyond the community for reasons of clarity and control. Privacy and autonomy remain points of tension. In some homes, parents check devices, and school agreements require families to pledge that children will not have internet access. The sense of oversight can feel restrictive, especially for teenagers seeking independence. Some describe the pressure to conform as stifling, while others find reassurance in shared values and clear guidelines. The system offers moments of peace and connection, but also frustration and secrecy. It is neither a universal solution nor a universal hardship. Instead, it is a balance, shaped by faith, memory, and the hope that less digital noise might bring more calm. The question of how these communities remain connected to the outside world while holding their boundaries remains unresolved. For all the boundaries and public pledges, the digital world still finds its way in, sometimes through the most ordinary channels. In Brooklyn's Hasidic neighborhoods, stories circulate of teenagers hiding smartphones behind loose bricks or deep in coat linings. Devices appear at bus stops, in the back rows of yeshiva classrooms, or borrowed from a cousin who works outside the community. The city itself is a patchwork of signals. Even a short subway ride or a job at a local store can bring a young person face to face with the wider internet. Not every teenager seeks out forbidden screens, and not every family faces the same pressures. Some parents quietly suspect their children have access to WhatsApp or YouTube, but choose to look the other way. Others set strict rules, checking bags and pockets, or requiring signed school agreements that pledge no internet at home. The result is a landscape shaped as much by improvisation as by policy. One household might enforce a total ban, while another allows a filtered device for schoolwork, and a third turns a blind eye to a phone used only after hours. The consequences of crossing these boundaries are real, though they vary. In some schools, discovery of a smartphone can mean suspension or even expulsion. Families may face visits from community leaders or whispered warnings from neighbors. A teenager caught with a device might be grounded, lose the trust of elders, or find themselves shut out of social circles. For some, the risk is worth it, a lifeline to friends, music, or the outside world. For others, it's a source of anxiety, a reminder that belonging can hinge on what you hide as much as what you share. This tension between tradition and technology is not a secret rebellion, but a generational negotiation. Rabbinic leaders, focused on continuity, see digital connection as a threat to the fabric of community. Young people, growing up in a world where connection is currency, often feel the pull of both sides. The rules are clear, but the reality is messier, marked by quiet defiance, family debate, and the constant work of drawing, redrawing, and sometimes crossing the line. As the story moves forward, the question lingers. How do these communities manage to run businesses, coordinate logistics, and stay afloat in a digital economy while holding fast to limits that most would find unworkable? The answer lies not in a single policy, but in a web of adaptations, workarounds, and the ongoing dialogue between past and present. Filtered smartphones have become a fixture in Brooklyn's Hasidic neighborhoods, where specialty retailers line the streets with devices designed to keep digital boundaries clear. Companies like Kosher and Keyphone have built their reputations on offering phones that promise safety through restriction. Kosher, with over 35,000 customers, sells everything from voice-only flip phones to smartphones, stripped of internet, social media, and app stores at the firmware level. Keyphone, a newer player, offers hybrid models, smartphones that allow only a handful of pre-approved apps while blocking anything not on the community whitelist. Both brands bundle their devices with filtered SIM cards and rely on organizations like Tag to manage and update block lists, ensuring that boundaries remain current as technology evolves. The range of products is broad. Some families choose the most basic hardware, no texting, no camera, just calls. Others permit limited functions, a calendar, WhatsApp for business, or GPS for drivers. Certification is central. Retailers display rabbinic seals or digital certificates to show compliance with religious standards, and firmware updates may require approval from a religious board. The marketing language is consistent, safe, distraction-free, Torah protected. These are selling points, not scientific guarantees, but they reflect a desire for order in a world of constant digital noise. Browser-free hardware sets the baseline, but limited smartphones, devices that look like mainstream models yet operate within strict controls, have expanded the market. Block list systems allow for customization, with some communities maintaining their own approved app lists. For professionals, certain models offer enough connectivity for work, but stop short of unrestricted access. This industry turns religious standards into product categories, creating a new kind of digital divide. For those who leave the community, unrestricted devices can feel overwhelming, while teenagers inside sometimes seek out loopholes. Still, filtered smartphones have become part of daily life, shaping how families, businesses, and entire neighborhoods navigate the digital age. In Brooklyn's Hasidic neighborhoods, filtered internet service emerged as a kind of digital infrastructure shaped by the needs and convictions of religious households. Rather than a single rule, it's a web of technical controls, each layer reflecting a community's standards for what should be allowed online. Providers like KosherNet and NetFree Connect deliver internet filtered at the network level, blocking unwanted content before it enters the home. KosherNet, for example, offers a 25 megabits per second plan bundled with a TAG certified filter, typically priced at $45 per month. These services rely on DNS filtering, VPN-based controls, or dedicated hardware that enforces a whitelist of approved sites. Certification plays a defining role. The Technology Awareness Group, or TAG, maintains lists of approved devices and oversees filter updates. SafeCell manages SIM card block lists, ensuring only authorized phones or computers access filtered networks. Control can be enforced at many points. A device might be locked down at the operating system level, a SIM card restricted, or a specific router required. Some families set up user accounts with limited permissions, while others install workplace-grade firewalls to restrict access to business hours. Vendor marketing often describes these services as Torah-protected or family-friendly, but claims of effectiveness rest on internal audits and community trust. Independent technical reviews are rare. For many families, the system succeeds in shielding children and supporting adults' work needs, yet boundaries remain imperfect. Teenagers sometimes find ways around restrictions, and those leaving the community describe the challenge of adapting to unrestricted internet. The market for filtered internet remains small compared to mainstream broadband, but demand is steady. Some households adopt every available control, while others choose only a few layers. What connects them is the belief that infrastructure shapes behavior. In these neighborhoods, internet access is not just a utility, but a carefully constructed system. One filter, one device, one account at a time, reflecting the values of those it serves. On Brooklyn's 13th Avenue, storefronts display phones that promise less, not more. Kosher Cell and Keyphone, the neighborhood's mainstays, offer stripped-down flip phones and smartphones locked down at the operating system. Browsers, social media, and app stores are blocked by design. Each device passes through layers of rabbinic certification and technical checks, with a visible seal marking it as acceptable for community use. The market extends well beyond hardware. Service plans include filtered SIM cards, monthly filter updates, and hotlines for troubleshooting. TAG, the Technology Awareness Group, maintains block lists and certifies devices, while SafeCell handles SIM restrictions. KosherNet and NetFree Connect provide filtered broadband, starting at $45 per month for a 25 megabits per second plan. Each checkpoint, device, SIM, network reflects a communal standard, not just personal choice. Numbers are elusive. Kosher Cell claims more than 35,000 customers, and retailers report hundreds of sales each week. But household penetration, annual sales, and total market size remain unverified, with most figures coming from within the industry itself. What is certain is that demand for filtered technology has created a web of jobs, technicians, filter managers, and customer support roles, all sustained by the need to limit open access. Boundaries shift as needs change. Hybrid devices, allowing select apps for work or school, have become common, especially after COVID-19 made remote learning and telehealth essential. Some workplaces now require filtered laptops with virtual private networks and locked-down user accounts, sold at a premium by local IT shops. The filtered tech sector, once a niche, now operates as a steady business with its own rules and rhythms. This controlled access market reveals an economic paradox. By restricting the open internet, the community has built an industry that thrives on adaptation, technical skill, and constant demand for new devices. The story remains unresolved. its outcome as layered as the filters themselves. Maybe the joke's on us. While the world debates screen time, these communities quietly engineered their own boundaries. Not everyone inside agrees, and the trade-offs are real, especially for those who leave. Here, religious law, not clinical data, guides the rules, and each family draws the line differently. Still, the paradox stands. In a city built on connectivity, some run thriving businesses while barely touching the tech driving it all. Would you choose that balance?